The scream tore through the night like a wounded animal, and Clay Morgan knew in his bones that something had gone terribly wrong at the Henderson homestead, 3 miles east across the prairie. He had been riding fence lines in the driving rain, checking for breaks where cattle might wander through when the sound reached him on the wind. Most men might have convinced themselves they had imagined it, but Clay had learned long ago to trust his instincts. He turned his horse toward the distant glow of lamplight, barely visible through the sheeting rain, and dug his heels in hard. The year was 1884, and the Oklahoma Territory was still wild enough that neighbors looked after neighbors because there was nobody else to do it. Clay had met Samuel Henderson and his young wife Catherine only twice since they had settled their claims 6 months prior, but that was enough. A man did not ignore a cry like that, not out here where help could be days away and death could come in minutes. Lightning split the sky as Clay galloped across the open grassland, illuminating the small soddy that the Hendersons called home. The structure was barely more than a hole dug into a hillside with a front wall and door, but it was shelter, and that counted for everything on the prairie. Clay's horse fought the bit, spooked by the thunder that followed the lightning like cannon fire, but he held the animal steady and pushed forward. He dismounted in a spray of mud and rain, tying his horse to the post outside before pounding on the rough wooden door. Another scream answered him, high and desperate, and he did not wait for invitation. Clay shoved the door open and stepped into the dim interior, rain streaming from his hat and coat. The scene before him registered in fragments. Catherine Henderson on the narrow bed against the far wall, her face pale as death and twisted in agony. A puddle of water on the floor near the bed, no sign of Samuel Henderson anywhere, and Catherine's belly, swollen with child, contracting visibly beneath her soaked nightdress. Mrs. Henderson, Clay said, removing his hat and moving toward her. "Where is your husband?" Catherine's eyes focused on him with difficulty, her breath coming in sharp gasps. "Gone," she managed. "Went to Fort Reno 3 days ago for supplies. Should have been back yesterday. The baby is not supposed to come for another month. Oh God, something is wrong." Clay felt his throat go dry. He was 26 years old, had broken wild horses and faced down armed cattle thieves, but this was entirely outside his experience. He had never even seen a woman give birth, much less helped with one. But looking at Catherine Henderson's terrified face, he knew he had no choice. "All right," he said, forcing his voice to remain calm. "All right, Mrs. Henderson, we are going to get through this together. First, I need you to tell me your given name. We are past formalities now." "Catherine," she gasped. "My name is Catherine. Please, I am so frightened. The pains started an hour ago and they keep getting worse." Clay looked around the small soddy, taking inventory. The space was neat despite being carved from earth, with a small stove in one corner, a table with 2 chairs and shelves holding supplies. A lantern burned on the table, casting wavering shadows on the earthen walls. He needed more light. "Catherine, I am going to light every lamp and candle you have," Clay said, shrugging out of his wet coat and hanging it on a peg by the door. "Then I am going to build up that fire. Can you tell me where you keep your linens and clean cloths?" She pointed with a shaking hand toward a trunk at the foot of the bed. "In there. Clay, that is your name, is it not? Clay Morgan from the spread west of here." "That is right," he said, finding 2 more lanterns and lighting them from the first. The soddy brightened considerably, and he could see Catherine more clearly now. She was young, perhaps 22 or 23, with honey-colored hair darkened by sweat and plastered to her face. Her eyes were wide with fear, but there was determination there too. "I am going to help you, Catherine. I have never done this before, but I am not going anywhere and we are going to figure it out together." Another contraction hit her, and she cried out, her hands fisting in the blankets beneath her. Clay moved to the trunk and pulled out an armful of clean linens, then fed more wood into the stove until it was roaring. The soddy was cold from the storm, and he knew Catherine would need warmth. The baby would need it too. He brought a chair close to the bed and sat down, meeting Catherine's eyes. I need to know what is happening with your body. I know this is not proper, but there is nobody else here, and I need you to tell me everything so I can help." Catherine nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I felt the baby drop lower this morning, but I thought it was just how pregnancy felt near the end. Then my water broke an hour ago, just gushed out onto the floor. That is when the pains started coming fast. They are supposed to start slow and build over hours, maybe even days. But these are close together already, and they hurt so much." Clay had grown up on a ranch where cattle and horses gave birth regularly, and he tried to apply that knowledge now. "Sometimes babies come fast, especially if it is not the first. Is this your first?" "Yes," Catherine sobbed. "My first baby, and Samuel is not here, and what if something goes wrong? What if the baby is in trouble because it is coming early?" "Listen to me," Clay said firmly, reaching out to take her hand. He hesitated for just a moment, then grasped it when another contraction began and she reached for him desperately. "Look at me, Catherine. You are strong. You came all the way out here to the territory and made a home in a hole in the ground. You are pioneer stock, and you can do this. That baby is coming whether we are ready or not, so we are going to be ready. Do you understand?" She nodded, gripping his hand so hard he thought the bones might crack. The contraction seemed to go on forever, her face contorting with pain, and then it eased and she fell back against the pillows, gasping. "How far apart are they coming?" Clay asked. "I do not know anymore," Catherine said. "Maybe 5 minutes, maybe less. Everything is happening so fast." Clay stood and went to the wash basin, scrubbing his hands thoroughly with soap. He had no medical training, but he knew cleanliness mattered when dealing with wounds, and he figured birth was not so different. His heart was pounding, but he kept his face calm as he dried his hands on a clean cloth. "Catherine, I need to check how far along you are," he said. "I know this is difficult, but I have to know if the baby is coming now or if we have time." She nodded, her face flushing with embarrassment even through the pain. "Do what you need to do. I trust you." Those words hit Clay harder than he expected. This woman who barely knew him was trusting him with her life and her child's life because she had no other choice. He moved to the foot of the bed and carefully checked her progress, trying to remember everything he had ever heard the ranch hands say about difficult births with the animals. What he found made his blood run cold. He could feel the baby's head, right there, ready to be born. "All right, Catherine," he said, moving back to sit beside her and take her hand again. "The baby is coming very soon. Next time you feel the urge to push, I want you to do it. Your body knows what to do. I am going to hold this lantern close so I can see, and I am going to talk you through every step. Can you do that?" "I am so scared," she whispered. "What if I cannot do this? What if the baby does not survive because it is early?" "You can do this," Clay said with absolute certainty. "And that baby is going to be just fine because you are its mother, and you are the strongest woman I have ever met for even attempting to make a life out here. Now, when the next pain comes, I want you to take a deep breath and push with everything you have." The next contraction came less than 2 minutes later, and Catherine bore down with a guttural cry that seemed torn from her soul. Clay positioned one of the lanterns on the bedside table and watched as the baby's head emerged slightly, then retreated as the contraction ended. "Good," he said, though his hands were shaking. "That was good, Catherine. The baby is coming. I can see the head, dark hair, lots of it. Next push, we are going to get the head out all the way. You are doing this. You are bringing your baby into the world." She was crying openly now, tears mixing with sweat as her body prepared for the next contraction. "Tell me something," she gasped. "Tell me anything. I need to hear your voice. I need to know I am not alone." Clay searched his mind desperately for something to say, anything that might comfort her or distract her from the pain. "I grew up in Texas," he said, "on a ranch bigger than some towns, had 4 brothers and 2 sisters, and I was right in the middle. My mother used to say I was the quiet one, always off by myself with the horses. I came up here to the territory 2 years ago looking for my own piece of land, my own future. I have been lonely, if I am honest. working my claim alone, eating my own terrible cooking, talking to my horse more than people. And then tonight, riding through this storm, I heard you call out. I think maybe I was supposed to be out there tonight. I think maybe I was supposed to be here to help you. Another contraction gripped her and she pushed with everything she had. The baby's head emerged fully this time and Clay felt his breath catch. He supported the tiny head with shaking hands, awed by the reality of what was happening. "The head is out," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Catherine, you are doing it. The head is out. One more big push and we will have the shoulders and then your baby will be here." "I cannot," Catherine sobbed. "I cannot do it anymore. It hurts too much." "Yes, you can," Clay said fiercely. "You can do this, Catherine. Your baby needs you to do this. One more push. One more and you get to meet your child." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and something passed between them in that moment. He saw her fear and her pain, but he also saw her courage. And she saw something in him too, something that made her nod and gather her strength. The next contraction came, and Catherine pushed with a primal scream that echoed off the earthen walls of the soddy. The baby's shoulders emerged, and then in a rush, the entire tiny body slipped into Clay's waiting hands. He stared down in absolute wonder at the small, slippery, impossibly perfect human being he held. For a terrifying moment, the baby did not move or make a sound. Clay's heart stopped. Then he remembered his mother talking about her youngest sister's birth, how the baby had needed stimulation to start breathing. He grabbed a clean cloth and gently, but firmly rubbed the baby's back. The infant let out a sputtering cough, then a thin wail that was the most beautiful sound Clay had ever heard. The baby's skin pinked up before his eyes, tiny lungs filling with air, small fists waving in protest at being forced into this cold, bright world. "You have a son," Clay said, his voice breaking. "Catherine, you have a son and he is perfect." She was laughing and crying at the same time, reaching out with desperate hands. Clay quickly wrapped the baby in a clean cloth, trying to remember what came next. The cord was still attached, pulsing with blood. He knew it needed to be cut, but first he placed the baby on Catherine's chest, and her arms came around her son with a mother's instinct as old as time. "My baby," she whispered, touching the infant's face with trembling fingers. "My little boy." "Oh, he is so small. Is he all right? Is he truly all right?" Clay examined the baby as best he could. The infant was small, certainly, but his color was good and his cry was strong. All his fingers and toes were there, and he seemed to be breathing well. "He looks healthy to me," Clay said. "Small, yes, but strong. He has a good set of lungs on him." He found a clean knife and held it in the flame of the stove for a long moment to sterilize it, then used 2 pieces of clean string to tie off the cord in 2 places before cutting between them, just as he had seen done with foals and calves. His hands were steadier now. The immediate crisis passed. But he knew they were not done yet. Catherine still had to deliver the afterbirth, and he needed to make sure she was not bleeding too heavily. He had heard of women dying after childbirth, and the thought of this brave woman who had just brought life into the world with such courage now dying made him feel sick. "There is still a bit more to do," he told her gently. "The afterbirth needs to come. Can you feel any more contractions?" Catherine nodded, her attention focused on her son who was rooting against her chest, already seeking to nurse. "Yes, but they are nothing compared to before. Clay, help me get him to feed. I need to make sure he can eat." Clay helped her adjust the baby, then turned away to give her privacy as she guided her son to nurse. The infant latched on after a moment, and Catherine let out a small laugh of relief. "He knows what to do," she said in wonder. Over the next 20 minutes, Clay tended to Catherine as best he could, helping with the afterbirth and cleaning up the blood and fluids. He changed the bedding beneath her, working with as much delicacy as he could manage while she held her nursing son. The bleeding seemed normal to him, though he was no expert, and Catherine's color was improving as the initial shock and exertion passed. Outside, the storm still raged, rain hammering on the roof and thunder rolling across the prairie. But inside the little soddy, there was warmth and light and new life. Clay built up the fire again, then heated water to make tea from the supplies he found in Catherine's neat cupboard. She drank the tea gratefully, her son now sleeping against her chest wrapped in clean linens. Clay had found tiny gowns in the trunk, clothes Catherine must have sewn during her pregnancy, and they had dressed the baby in one that hung loosely on his small frame. "I do not know how to thank you," Catherine said, her voice exhausted but peaceful. "You saved our lives tonight. If you had not been here, if you had not heard me, I do not know what would have happened." Clay sat in the chair beside the bed, his own exhaustion catching up with him now that the danger had passed. "I think you would have managed somehow," he said. "You are stronger than you know, Catherine Henderson." "Catherine," she said softly. "Just Catherine. After what we have been through tonight, I think we are past formalities, do you not agree?" He smiled, a real smile that felt strange on his face. He smiled so rarely these days. "Just Catherine, then, and just Clay." She looked down at her son, her expression tender beyond words. "I am going to name him Samuel after his father, but his middle name will be Clayton if you do not mind. So he will always carry with him the name of the man who brought him safely into the world." Clay felt his throat tighten with emotion. "I would be honored," he managed. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the baby sleeping, Catherine drifting in and out of exhausted dozing, and Clay keeping watch. He stoked the fire when it burned low and kept the lanterns lit, a beacon in the storm-dark night. His mind was racing despite his physical tiredness. He kept replaying the events of the past hours, the weight of that tiny life in his hands, the trust in Catherine's eyes when she looked at him. As dawn approached and the storm finally began to break, Clay heard the sound of a horse approaching. He looked out the small window and saw a man on horseback, riding hard toward the soddy. Samuel Henderson had returned. Clay opened the door and stepped out into the gray pre-dawn light. Samuel Henderson was a stocky man with a full beard, his face haggard with worry. He practically fell off his horse, his eyes wild. "Is Catherine all right? I heard the storm coming and tried to ride through the night, but I had to shelter for a few hours. I have been so worried. The baby is not due for weeks yet." "Your wife is fine," Clay said quickly, "and you have a son." He came early in the middle of the storm. "Your wife is a remarkable woman, Mr. Henderson. She is strong, and so is your boy." Samuel Henderson stared at him for a long moment, processing the information. "A son, I have a son, and Catherine is truly all right." "See for yourself," Clay said, stepping aside. Samuel rushed into the soddy, and Clay heard his exclamation of joy, Catherine's tired laugh, the sound of the baby fussing. Clay untied his horse and led the animal to the small lean-to shelter where the Hendersons kept their own horses. He unsaddled the animal and rubbed it down, giving the new family privacy. When he returned to the soddy, Samuel was sitting on the edge of the bed, holding his son with wonder written all across his face. Catherine was smiling, though Clay could see the exhaustion pulling at her. "Mr. Morgan," Samuel said, looking up with tears in his eyes. "Catherine told me what you did. I can never repay you for this. Never. You gave me my family. If there is anything at all that I can ever do for you, you only have to ask." Clay shook his head. "No payment needed." "I did what any neighbor would do." But even as he said it, he knew it was not quite true. What had happened in this soddy during the long stormy night had been more than neighborly duty. Something had changed in him, some door in his heart that he had kept carefully closed had been forced open. He looked at Catherine and found her watching him, and the expression in her eyes told him she felt it too. Not attraction, not romance, but something deeper. A connection forged in crisis, a bond created when two strangers had worked together to bring life into the world. It was profound and unsettling and precious all at once. "You should rest," Clay said, speaking to Catherine but feeling Samuel's presence like an intrusion which made him feel guilty. "Both of you need to recover. I will check the property before I go, make sure the storm did not damage anything." He escaped outside into the cool morning air, trying to organize his chaotic thoughts. The prairie stretched out before him, washed clean by the rain, and the rising sun painted everything gold and pink. It was beautiful, and Clay felt something shifting inside him, some understanding that his life had just changed in ways he could not yet comprehend. He checked the Hendersons' small barn and found everything secure. Their milk cow was fine, their chickens had weathered the storm in their coop. The garden was muddy but intact. He mended a section of fence that had blown down, working with his hands while his mind wandered. He thought about Catherine's courage, the way she had trusted him completely when she had no other choice. He thought about the weight of that newborn baby in his hands, the terrifying moment when the infant had not breathed, and the overwhelming relief when he finally cried. He thought about how empty his own life suddenly seemed, how lonely his claim felt, how the prospect of returning to his solitary existence now filled him with a strange melancholy. When he returned to the soddy, he found Samuel outside looking sheepish. "Catherine is sleeping," he said. "The baby too. Mr. Morgan, I wanted to talk to you alone. Catherine told me everything, how you helped her through the birth, how you never left her side, how you talked to her and kept her calm. She said she would not have survived without you." "She is stronger than she thinks," Clay said. "Maybe so," Samuel agreed. "But strength alone is not always enough. She needed you and you were there. That means something, Mr. Morgan. That means everything." He paused, seeming to struggle with his words. "I need to go back to Fort Reno tomorrow. I never got the supplies I went for because the storm caught me halfway there and I had to turn back. We need food, medicine, things for the baby now that he is here early. I will be gone 2 days, maybe 3. Would you be willing to check on Catherine and the baby while I am gone? I know it is a lot to ask, but I would rest easier knowing someone was looking after them." Clay should have said no. He should have put distance between himself and the strange, intense feelings that had taken root in his chest during the long night. But instead, he found himself nodding. "I will check on them every day until you return," he promised. Samuel's relief was palpable. "Thank you. I will leave at first light tomorrow. That gives Catherine 1 day to rest before I have to go." Clay rode home as the sun climbed higher, exhaustion pulling at him but his mind too active to rest. His own soddy, larger than the Hendersons but just as rough, felt emptier than ever. He cared for his horse, ate a cold meal, and then fell into his bed and slept the dreamless sleep of total exhaustion. He woke in the late afternoon, disoriented and strangely bereft. For a moment he could not remember why, and then it all came flooding back. He got up, washed, and ate properly, then found himself restless. He spent the remaining hours of daylight working his land, repairing storm damage, checking his small herd of cattle. But his mind was 3 miles east the entire time. The next morning, Clay rode over to the Henderson place to find Samuel preparing to leave. Catherine was up, sitting in a chair by the stove with baby Samuel in her arms. She looked tired but well, her color good, her smile genuine when she saw Clay. "I am so glad you came," she said. "I was hoping to see you before Samuel left. I wanted to thank you again properly now that my head is clearer." "No thanks needed," Clay said, but she shook her head. "Yes, they are. What you did, Clay, was extraordinary. You were calm and strong when I was terrified. You knew exactly what to say to get me through it. I will never forget that. Never." Samuel left shortly after, and Clay found himself alone with Catherine and the baby. It should have been awkward, but somehow it was not. They fell into an easy conversation as Catherine nursed the baby and Clay made breakfast for them both from her supplies. "Tell me more about your family in Texas," Catherine said as they ate. "You mentioned them last night, but I want to hear more. What was it like growing up with so many siblings?" Clay found himself talking, words coming easier than they had in years. He told her about his childhood on the ranch, about his brothers who were all louder and more confident than him, about his sisters who had teased him mercilessly but also defended him fiercely. He told her about his mother who had died 5 years ago and how her death had fractured the family, about his father remarrying quickly and how it had felt like a betrayal. About leaving Texas to find his own way, his own land, his own life. And have you found it? Catherine asked softly. Your own life? Clay paused, considering. I thought I had. I have good land, water rights, a growing herd, but lately it has felt hollow. I work from dawn to dusk, and at the end of the day there is nobody to talk to, nobody to share it with. I thought I wanted solitude, but maybe what I really wanted was independence. There is a difference. There is, Catherine agreed. She looked down at her son, her expression thoughtful. I was lonely in Kansas City before I married Samuel. My parents were dead, I was working in a dress shop, and every day was the same. When Samuel proposed and told me about his plans to claim land in the territory, I jumped at the chance. Not because I loved him, not then, but because I wanted adventure. I wanted a purpose. Love came later, slowly, as we built this life together. But the loneliness I felt in a city full of people was worse than anything I have felt out here. Clay stayed for several hours, helping with chores and making sure Catherine had everything she needed. When he finally left, he promised to return the next day. As he rode home, he realized he was already looking forward to it. The pattern continued over the next 2 days. Clay rode over each morning and stayed until afternoon, helping with the heavy work that Catherine could not do while recovering from childbirth. He chopped firewood, carried water from the well, tended to the animals, and in between they talked. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing stories and opinions and dreams. Clay held baby Samuel while Catherine cooked or cleaned, marveling at how natural it felt to cradle the infant against his chest. On the 3rd day, Samuel returned with a wagon full of supplies. He found Clay and Catherine laughing over something, the baby sleeping peacefully in a cradle by the fire. If Samuel noticed anything unusual in the easy familiarity between them, he said nothing. He was grateful for Clay's help and said so repeatedly. Clay knew he should stay away after that. Samuel was home, Catherine had help, and the baby was thriving despite his early arrival. There was no reason for Clay to keep visiting. But when Samuel stopped by Clay's place a week later to return a tool he had borrowed and mentioned that he would be going to Fort Reno again in a few days, and would Clay mind checking on Catherine? Clay agreed immediately. This became the pattern over the following weeks. Samuel made regular trips to Fort Reno to sell crops and buy supplies, and Clay checked on Catherine during his absences. Even when Samuel was home, Clay found excuses to visit. Helping with a roof repair, bringing over a haunch of venison from a deer he had shot, borrowing some sourdough starter that Catherine had cultivated. The truth was that Clay was falling in love, and he hated himself for it. Catherine was a married woman, a new mother, completely off limits. But he could not stop the way his heart lifted when he saw her, the way time seemed to fly when they were together, the way he thought about her constantly when they were apart. He told himself it was just friendship, just the bond formed during the dramatic night of Samuel's birth. But in his most honest moments, usually lying awake in his bed at night, he knew it was more. Catherine, for her part, gave no indication that she felt anything beyond friendship. She was warm and welcoming, clearly valued his company, but she never said or did anything inappropriate. She spoke of Samuel with affection and respect, was devoted to her baby, and seemed content with her life. If she felt any of the confusing emotions that tormented Clay, she hid it perfectly. Summer turned to autumn, and baby Samuel grew from a tiny, fragile infant into a chubby, healthy baby. Clay watched him change and develop, feeling a fierce protectiveness toward the child he had helped bring into the world. He taught himself to make simple toys and carved wooden animals for the baby, presented Catherine with a beautiful cradle he had built during long evenings when he could not sleep. It was Samuel Henderson who finally forced the issue. He stopped by Clay's place on a cool October evening, his face serious. Clay invited him in, offered coffee, and tried to ignore the nervousness churning in his gut. "I need to talk to you about Catherine," Samuel said without preamble. Clay's heart stopped. Had Samuel noticed his feelings? Was he about to be told to stay away? All right, he managed. Samuel sighed heavily, rubbing his face with both hands. I am going to tell you something, and I need you to hear me out before you say anything. Can you do that? Clay nodded, unable to speak. Catherine and I married for practical reasons, Samuel began. I needed a wife to help with the homestead. She needed security and adventure. We were honest with each other about that from the start. We have affection for each other, respect, but what we have is a partnership more than a grand romance. And I thought that would be enough. I think Catherine thought so too. He paused, his eyes meeting Clay's directly. But I have watched the two of you over these past months, and I have seen something that I never expected. I have seen my wife come alive in a way she never has with me. I have seen you look at her like she is the sun and the moon and the stars all together, and I have come to a decision. Clay felt like he might be sick. Samuel, I never meant— I know, Samuel interrupted. I know you never acted inappropriately, never crossed a line, neither has Catherine, but that does not change what is there between you. And here is the thing, Mr. Morgan, I am not a romantic man. I am practical. I look at situations and make decisions based on what makes sense, and it makes sense for me to let Catherine go. What? Clay stared at him in shock. Divorce is not easy and it is not pleasant, but it can be done, Samuel said. Catherine does not know I am here. She would never ask this of me. She is too loyal and too bound by duty. But I can see that she is not happy, not truly, and I want her to be happy. She deserves that after everything she has been through. You would do that? Clay asked, his mind reeling. You would divorce her so she could be with me. But what about you? What about Samuel? I would miss the boy, Samuel admitted, his voice rough. But he is not my blood, not really. He is yours in a way. You brought him into this world. You have been more of a father to him these past months than I have, if I am being honest. I'm always gone, always working, and when I am home, I am exhausted. You are the one who holds him, plays with him, makes him smile. He stood abruptly. Think about it. Talk to Catherine. I am going to Fort Reno in 3 days, and I will be gone for a week. If when I come back you two have decided you want to be together, I will not stand in your way. I will go back to Kansas City and file for divorce on grounds of abandonment. Catherine can claim I left her, which will protect her reputation. It will take time, but it can be done. He was gone before Clay could formulate a response, riding off into the autumn twilight and leaving Clay standing in his doorway, feeling like his entire world had been turned upside down. Clay did not sleep that night. He paced his small soddy, arguing with himself. This was wrong, was it not? A man did not steal another man's wife, did not break up a family, but Samuel himself was offering, was practically insisting. And what kind of life was it for Catherine? Married to a man she respected but did not love, trapped in a partnership without passion. What kind of life was it for him? Loving her from a distance and knowing he could never have her by dawn, Clay had made his decision. He rode to the Henderson place as the sun rose, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might burst from his chest. He found Catherine outside, hanging laundry while baby Samuel napped in his cradle nearby. She smiled when she saw him, that warm, genuine smile that always made his breath catch. Clay, I was not expecting you today. Samuel is not leaving until tomorrow. Is everything all right? I need to talk to you, Clay said, dismounting. Samuel came to see me last night. Her smile faded, replaced by concern. What did he say? Clay told her everything, watching as shock, confusion, and then something that might have been hope flickered across her face. When he finished, there was a long silence broken only by the wind rustling through the dry grass. He wants to let me go, Catherine said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. He noticed. Noticed what? Clay asked, needing to hear her say it. She looked up at him and there were tears in her eyes. That I am in love with you. That I have been since that night you helped me bring Samuel into the world. I have tried so hard to hide it, Clay. I have been a faithful wife. I have never acted on these feelings, but they are there all the same. Every time you visit, every time you smile at me or hold my baby, it gets harder to pretend. Clay closed the distance between them in 2 long strides. He took her hands in his, looking down into her eyes. "I have been in love with you since that night too," he said. "I have tried to fight it, tried to tell myself it was wrong, but Catherine, I cannot imagine my life without you now. You and Samuel, you are my family, you are everything I did not know I needed. But what about your husband? Are you truly all right with this, with hurting him?" Catherine shook her head. "Samuel is a good man, but he does not love me the way you do. He will be fine, Clay. He will go back to Kansas City, find a practical wife who wants a practical marriage, and he will be content. But if I let you walk away, if I stay in this marriage out of duty, I will regret it for the rest of my life. I will wonder what could have been, and I will resent Samuel even though it is not his fault." "Then we do this," Clay said. "We do this right. We wait for the divorce. We do not give anyone reason to talk. But when it is done, when you are free, I want to marry you. I want to raise Samuel as my son. I want to build a life with you that is full of love and laughter and all the things we both dreamed of when we came out here to the territory." She was crying now, but smiling through her tears. "Yes," she said. "Yes to all of it. Yes to you, Clay Morgan." He wanted to kiss her so badly it hurt, but Samuel was still her husband and they had agreed to do this right. So instead, he just held her hands and smiled back at her, feeling like his heart might explode from the sheer joy of it all. The next months were both wonderful and difficult. Samuel left for Kansas City and wrote to say he had filed for divorce and would not be returning. The legal process was slow, complicated by the distance and the territory's uncertain legal status, but it moved forward. Catherine and Clay were scrupulously proper during this time, never alone together without baby Samuel present, never giving the neighbors any reason to gossip. But they courted in their own way. Clay visited every day, helped with the heavy work around the homestead, brought gifts for Catherine and the baby. They talked about their future, made plans for combining their 2 claims into one larger ranch, discussed what they would name the children they hoped to have together. Baby Samuel took his first steps and spoke his first word, which was "da," while looking directly at Clay. Catherine cried, and Clay picked the boy up and held him tight, feeling a love so fierce it was almost painful. The divorce was finalized in February of 1885, almost a year after that stormy night that had changed everything. Clay and Catherine were married 1 week later in a simple ceremony at Fort Reno, with baby Samuel watching from his mother's arms. Catherine wore a simple blue dress she had sewn herself, and Clay wore his best suit, which was still pretty worn. But none of that mattered. What mattered was the love shining in their eyes as they spoke their vows, the rightness of Catherine's hand in his, the feeling that they were finally where they were meant to be. They combined their homesteads as planned, building a proper house to replace the soddy Catherine had been living in. It took 2 years of hard work, but by 1887 they had a 4-room house with glass windows and a real wood floor. It was the finest home for 50 miles, and Catherine took enormous pride in it. Their first child together, a daughter they named Rose, was born in the spring of 1886. This time, there was no storm, no panic, no desperate improvisation. But Clay was there beside Catherine through every moment of labor, holding her hand and talking her through it just as he had that first time. When Rose was born, healthy and screaming, Clay cut the cord with steady hands and placed their daughter on Catherine's chest with tears streaming down his face. 2 years later, they had another son whom they named Thomas. And 2 years after that, twin girls, Emma and Lily. Their house was full of noise and chaos and love. Everything Clay had never known he wanted and Catherine had dreamed of but feared she would never have. Samuel, who was now 6 years old, grew up knowing Clay as his father in every way that mattered. When he was old enough to understand, Catherine told him the truth about his birth father, about the stormy night when Clay had delivered him, about the complicated choices that had led to their family. Samuel listened carefully, then shrugged and said, "Clay is my pa, that is all that matters." And that was the end of it. The ranch prospered as the territory grew more settled. Clay's cattle herd expanded, and they added horses as well. Catherine started a large garden and sold vegetables at Fort Reno, earning money for the luxuries they could not produce themselves. They worked side by side every day, partners in every sense of the word. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1895, Clay took Catherine outside after the children were asleep. They stood on the porch of their home, looking out over the land they had built together, and he pulled her close. "Do you remember that night?" he asked. "The storm, the baby, how terrified we both were." "I remember everything," Catherine said, leaning into his embrace. "I remember thinking I was going to die, and then you walked through that door and I knew somehow that everything would be all right. I remember the sound of your voice talking me through it, the feeling of safety despite the fear. I remember falling in love with you without even realizing it. Best storm of my life," Clay said, and she laughed. "Mine too." Strange to think that if the baby had not come early, if you had not been riding fence that night, if the storm had not blown in when it did, we never would have found each other. "I think we would have," Clay said thoughtfully. "Maybe not that night, maybe not that way, but somehow." "Some things are meant to be, Catherine. We are meant to be." She turned in his arms to face him, rising up on her toes to kiss him softly. "I love you, Clay Morgan. I will love you until the day I die and beyond." "And I love you," he replied, kissing her back. "You and our children, you are my whole world. Everything I am, everything I have, it is all because of you." They stood there under the stars, holding each other as the prairie wind whispered around them. Inside, their 5 children slept peacefully, safe and warm and loved. The land stretched out around them, hard-won and precious. It had not been an easy life, but it had been a good one, full of purpose and meaning and love. Years continued to pass. The Oklahoma Territory became the state of Oklahoma in 1907, and the Morgan Ranch was by then a well-established operation with hired hands and a reputation for quality cattle. Samuel grew into a fine young man who took over much of the ranch management, allowing Clay to slow down a bit as he reached his 50s. Rose married a banker's son and moved to Oklahoma City. Thomas became a horse trainer of some renown. Emma and Lily remained close, marrying brothers and settling on adjacent properties just south of the Morgan Ranch. Clay and Catherine grew old together, their love deepening rather than fading as so many marriages did. They were the couple other homesteaders looked to, the proof that love and hard work could build something lasting out on the prairie. When people asked them how they had met, they always told the true story. About a stormy night, a baby coming early, a cowboy who held the lantern and talked her through it, and how that night had been the beginning of everything. On a warm summer evening in 1920, Clay sat on the porch of their home with Catherine beside him, just as they had done countless times over the past 35 years of marriage. They were both in their 60s now, their hair gray and their bodies showing the wear of a lifetime of hard work. But their hands were still intertwined, their love still as strong as ever. "We did all right, did we not?" Catherine said softly, watching their grandchildren play in the yard. Samuel's 3 children, Rose's 4, Thomas's 2, and Emma and Lily's combined brood of 6, all running and laughing in the golden evening light. "We did better than all right," Clay replied. "We built something real, something that will last. Those children, those grandchildren, they are our legacy. But more than that, we built a love that sustained us through everything life threw at us. That is what I am most proud of." "That stormy night changed everything," Catherine mused. "I was so frightened, so alone, and then you appeared. My unexpected savior, my unexpected love." "Not unexpected," Clay corrected gently. "Inevitable. You were my destiny, Catherine. I just did not know it until I held our son in my hands and saw the strength and courage in your eyes. That was the moment I started falling, and I have never stopped." She smiled at him, that same smile that had been making his heart skip for nearly 40 years. "Tell me again," she said. "Tell me the story of that night." So Clay told her, as he had many times over the years but never tired of. He told her about riding through the storm, hearing her scream, finding her alone and terrified. He told her about delivering Samuel, about the terror when the baby did not breathe and the overwhelming joy when he finally cried. He told her about realizing he was in love with a married woman, about Samuel Henderson's unexpected gift of freedom, about the long wait for the divorce, and the joy of finally making Catherine his wife. As he spoke, the grandchildren gathered around to listen, drawn by the emotion in their grandfather's voice. They had heard this story before, but they never tired of it either. It was the foundation story of their family, the tale of how love could bloom in the most unexpected circumstances and grow into something beautiful and lasting. When Clay finished, little Sarah, Samuel's youngest daughter, climbed into her grandmother's lap. "And they lived happily ever after," she said with satisfaction. "Yes," Catherine said, kissing the top of the child's head. "Yes, we did. We truly did." As the sun set over the Oklahoma prairie, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold, Clay pulled Catherine close and thought about all the years they had shared, all the challenges they had overcome, all the love they had built. That stormy night in 1884 had been the beginning, but it had led to this. A full life, a loving family, a partnership that had weathered every storm. The baby had come early on that stormy prairie night. A cowboy had held the lantern and talked her through it. And from that moment of crisis and fear had come a love story for the ages, a romance that had started in the most unexpected way, and had grown into something more beautiful than either of them could have imagined. They had built their happily ever after together, one day at a time, and it had been worth every moment.